Just watched a very striking report on the Channel 4 YouTube video, and it was a report about touching my face there. That's one of those things that's, quite hard not to do. Um, the report was about the situation in Bangladesh, and it was quite alarming seeing the sort of things that were going on here. There was a crowd of people, and it looked like they were surging to get onto a ferry. Um, Bangladesh is one of the world's most populous countries. I believe it ranks as sixth or seventh, 180 million people. It's a small country in terms of area, but it's very densely populated. In Dhaka, it's one of the biggest cities in the world. And the report was showing how further down the line COVID-19 could hit really, really hard, particularly the slums. And in the south of the country is the world's largest refugee camp, which is a camp for Rohingya Muslims who have fled from Myanmar. Um, the difficulty in a densely populated country like Bangladesh is it's virtually impossible to ensure social distancing because there are large families and in tightly packed slums that is just impossible. The government's taken some measures to distributing food, but there's a lot of side effects coming out of this. For example, textile workers have found that they've suddenly become unemployed because the European manufacturers or the European clothing firms have pulled out. Bangladesh is a big manufacturing country, textile manufacturing country. So this is something I've been thinking about for a while. As it stands, if you look at Worldometer, which is probably the most accurate source there is, and that's not an exact those figures are not going to be exact because if we look at the British figures, for example, which have hit 9,000 today, rounding off to the nearest thousand, that isn't including those who have died in care homes or at home. So the true figure in this country is going to be probably over 10,000 already. Um, but the five countries that are purportedly hardest hit in terms of deaths, United States, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, and Spain, are all Western developed countries. For a while now, I've been thinking if this is the impact in developed countries, what's this going to be like further down the line in countries like Bangladesh, Nigeria, Pakistan, perhaps Indonesia, Philippines? Ethiopia, high density, high population countries, ostensibly it's going to be very severe. Um, and then when you add religion to that, I mean, when you have large sermons to pray to Allah for this to be lifted, what does that do? It just gets more people packed in a tight area. That's clearly going in the face of social distancing. The figures for Bangladesh as it stands, 27 dead. Now, that could be that is the figure at this point, or it could be a massive, massive underestimate because there could be people who've already died in slums that haven't even been registered. We just don't know. It's very difficult to get the exact data from each country. I mean, I don't trust the Chinese figure for a start. 3,500 dead. When Belgium is on par with China, I find that very hard to believe. Um, in Ecuador, the official death toll is 297, but there was a news report on the situation there in Guayaquil, the largest city. There was a long row of cars with coffins inside waiting outside a cemetery, other people resorting to burying relatives in open fields. So I think whilst this is probably the most accurate source there is, it's based on research from Johns Hopkins University. Um, the true toll is going to be a lot higher, and I think we are going to see further down the line this really, really hit very hard in some of these developing countries. Um, it's bad enough right now. I mean, in the coming days, this is going to surpass the Great Smog of 1952 as Britain's worst post-war disaster in death in terms of the death toll. But I've been thinking about this for a while. why there is supposedly or ostensibly such low figures in poor countries in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And it makes me think either the data hasn't been fully released, it hasn't fully hit yet, or yeah, it's one of those things. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to imagine a situation where it doesn't hit hard. So in the end, COVID-19 could kill millions of people around the world. That isn't far-fetched. When you consider that the Hong Kong flu of 1968 killed about a million people, the Asian flu of 1957, about a million people, and of course the 1918 pandemic, commonly known as Spanish flu, killed upwards of 50 million. So it isn't far-fetched to believe that millions could die from this over the next year, and that's really, really striking. And that, I believe, could lead to political turmoil in the countries that are hardest hit. So this is, I think, we're really on the edge of a precipice with this, and we're struggling in developed countries in terms of the lockdown. Sacrifices that we're not used to being in. One caveat about that police incident earlier, which is that the police forces are themselves having to adapt to this, although I still think that's no excuse for overstepping the mark. But, in a country like Bangladesh, and the report shows us, I'll put a link here, um, the government's doing what it can on the surface, but I still think that it's going to be very difficult to prevent a humanitarian disaster from this. So it's going to be a real, real challenge for the world, and time will tell what really or how to what extent this is. We may never know the true figure. We may never know the true death toll from this, but it's difficult to believe that there isn't going to be an unfolding disaster in these countries. That's really tragic. And perhaps, without wanting to be too sentimental, it's just a reminder to appreciate life, particularly those of us who do live in more advanced societies.